Ooh, round of applause.
This is so
This is
exciting,
the second
everyone.
time I've had a clap up. This is awesome. Thank you. They strategically placed us right before happy hour so we could bore you about renewals, right? As Ryan mentioned, my name is Ed Lagonde. I'm a partner market director with Nava Benefits. And my role is I work with employers such as Guild and many others that are here to just crush your renewal season and to set up the best benefits package that gets you excited about, bringing on the best talent throughout the year as well. So excited to dive into this communication today. And I'm really excited to have Dominique Schroeder with Guild Education. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, no, super excited. My name is Dominique Schroeder. We've said it 3 times. You'll probably hopefully remember it after that. But I am the senior manager of benefit programs at Guild. So when they were talking about that 7 circles of hell, that is me literally going through the audits. But a little bit about Guild. So we are a fully remote company. We're based out of Colorado, but we are actually fully remote. So we are over 32 different states. We focus on skilling and career mobility, working with employers with large frontline workers to say, hey, why don't you utilize the talent that you have, and giving them the opportunity to move up in their careers. And so super excited to work with Nava. We're actually a newer client to them. So when I'm talking about crushing renewal season, you're going to hear a lot of my horror stories from last year. And I'm putting this team on a really high pedestal to make sure that doesn't happen again.
No pressure.
No pressure. No pressure at all. But yeah.
What's also cool is Guild is not only here talking about benefits, but they are also an employee benefit themselves, which is unique.
Yeah.
So I've been doing this about 16 years now, which is wild to think about. And the one thing I've noticed kind of cyclically or around a ton of employers that we work on is, who raise your hand? Like, who here loves the renewal season? Of course you would be, Kevin.
I dream about it.
That's when you earn your business.
I like to say I dream about it. I find new drinks to try during it. So we're all here.
Every month's got its own bar season, right, as well. But that's the thing, right, is no one gets excited about heading into renewals. Part of it is because of the surprises of the percentage increase that you're going to expect, the amount of workload it's going to be, how pissed off your employees are going to get because you're passing renewal increases onto them, right? And then, of course, your bin admin system breaks down for whatever reason, right? And so the idea here is to change our philosophy around it, to change the way we perceive it, so that we go into that with eyes wide open. We go into that season excited because then, of course, your employees become the beneficiaries of that, right? And so that's the idea here. That's what we want to talk about today. And hope it's a wonderful conversation. And as we dive into that, I know it's really easy to go into the things that can go well, but as Dom already kind of mentioned, I'd love to start off with what goes wrong, right? So talk me through, in your particular opinion, what can go wrong during the renewal season, and how do we mitigate those as well?
I think outside of, implementing a new HRIS system right before, a couple of the things that really stand out to me are not being aligned with your executive team. They're having these conversations about where they want the business to be, where they want it to go. And a lot of that can sometimes be around cost cutting. And if you don't have those conversations early, you could be coming into renewal with a completely different idea of what you're wanting to do than what they're expecting to see. And so one of the things that I try to make sure that I'm doing is starting those conversations very early and saying, hey, what are your expectations? What are some things that I need to think about as I'm going into renewals? And then the other thing is just starting too late. For me, I am lucky in that I do benefits all day, every day, but that's not the case for a lot of maybe smaller teams. But one of the things that I will say, I start my renewal conversations in February, if not earlier, when I'm thinking about what just happened during our last renewal season, what happened during open enrollment. And so starting too late and not including the right people in those conversations, I'd say is probably the worst things you could do.
So when do you think we should start, right? Because I find that no matter the type of employer, we're starting at all different times of year, obviously depending on your renewal season, especially if you're a January renewal, you're dealing with the holidays, family vacations and things of that nature. So how do you navigate that? When would you recommend kicking it off?
Yeah, so I actually start having some early strategy conversations with my CPO right after open enrollment. So I'll start in December. I'll be like, hey, here's what we did. Here's what we're seeing with our enrollments. here's what went well, but here's what didn't. And so actually building that into our retrospective, I found has been really, really helpful. So when renewal conversations does come through, I've already started over communicating on those and other topics. One of the things that I really like doing about that too is I'm able to kind of put in some things of here's what we didn't do this last year, but what I want to do next year. And so we're able to make some quicker decisions outside of the normal decision timeline of usually August or September. So then I can focus on those bigger pieces, the bigger cost items that are going to be coming up later.
And so let me ask this then. So how would you suggest roping that C-level executive into those conversations? And then do you think that people in my role or our role here can kind of help with that? Do you think we have a seat at the table at all?
I would hope so, because I can't do this by myself. So I will say something that I've started doing at my company is I will actually do quarterly reviews, but I also make a dashboard available. So I created a cost benefit analysis dashboard. It's not only looking at costs, but it's also looking at utilization as well as employee sentiment. And so whenever I have a one-on-one with my CPO or I'm in that conversation with them, I'm bringing it up. I'm saying, hey, did you see what this benefit was doing this other day? Or, hey, you know what? We had this really high cost claimant. I'm thinking it might come through. Now, I say that I'm still fully insured. So I'm relying a lot on the data that I can get and the support that I can get from my broker to say like, hey, these are things that might be coming up that you should maybe, then I will say, okay, I need to start talking about it now. I think that's your question.
Well, I can't provide you any data at all. So just kidding. That actually reminds me, fortunately, Dominique and I, we work together and with our team at Nava, and I get to work with her awesome team at Guild. But what's been nice about starting those conversations early, January renewal as well, is we're able to ask a lot of questions that aren't necessarily super obvious, like around leave administration. What does that have to do with your renewal strategy? Well, we're going to be marketing their and benchmarking their short and long-term disability. That all affects their EDI feeds, their API feeds as well. So everything is connected. And so we decided, why don't we just start now? So they're a January renewal, and I think we're presenting next week. But ultimately, the idea is to all of these conversations can kind of start early. I think you had mentioned to me before last year, like 6 months ahead of time, you knew exactly what tax vendor you were going to move to. Is that what happened?
Yeah. So again, as I mentioned, I like to make those smaller decisions before we hit those big ones, before we're talking about our medical, pharmacy, those large line items. And so we were making the decision to consolidate some of our vendors, and that included looking at our pre-tax accounts. And so I had mentioned during our previous renewal that I wanted to do it next year. And so my team already had an understanding that this is where we were going to go. They knew what vendors we were potentially going to be looking at. And so we were able to make that decision in July because I was able to have those conversations and kind of segment it out from our regular, larger renewal conversation.
I mean, who here has maybe been presented a really good idea, maybe a great cost savings idea, but it's way too close to your renewal and you're like, oh, shoot, it's November. We got Thanksgiving next week. I don't have time for this, right? Anybody experience that? Yeah, lots of nodding heads. And that has become the norm. Why is that the norm, right? We should have those conversations so much earlier. It is not difficult to do.
And I think the nice thing too is it spreads out your wins. It says like, hey, I'm looking at this for a full year. I'm not just waiting until the last minute to say, hey, I really need you to approve this $24 million budget line, please. It's like, no, hey, I'm looking to save us $100,000 right now, $200,000 right now. And all of those things add up. So when you're having that larger conversation, you can say, hey, you know what? We're already saving this. So can we maybe spend a little more here in this area to maybe add this new benefit? Because I've already been looking at it throughout the year.
I also think it gives us the opportunity to collaborate on what's going on in the market, whether it's lifestyle benefits, whether it's medical trend. If any of you were in the session up here right before, you got to hear a lot about how to transition from a traditional fully insured model to maybe an alternative funding model. But you can't just do that overnight and have a really good experience, right? One of the things I've appreciated is your team is very bought in to learning what alternative funding means because there's so many different flavors of it. Can you walk me through why that's been important to you or how that approach has been working for you so far?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, we're still fully insured, hoping to move self-funded in 2026. But I realize that there are a lot of stakeholders involved in that. It's not just me and my team managing it. It's our accounting team who will need to understand what does that look like from a cash flow perspective. It's our CPO who generally likes to know where all the money is going and how it's going in and out. It's also our HRIS teams who are having to set up like these different file feeds. And so for those folks to have an understanding on what this change would be and how it'll impact them is really, really important. And so we've taken the pathway of actually setting up self-funding 101 sessions with our CPO. We're going to have one next week. Nervous and excited about that so that they can truly understand, like, what is it? I think that a lot of the times people think they understand benefits because they mess with them every day, right? You go to your doctor, but the administration of benefits is actually really complex and different. And there can be a lot of beliefs in that space that are not true. I learned that in my last renewal where I actually did a lot of, what's the word? Fact checking. Myth busting. Thank you. A lot of myth busting with my CEO and CFO in regards to how they thought the money was being spent. And I was like, oh no, we're not spending the money in this way specifically for all of our folks who are going through IVF. Actually, this is our largest spend. And they're like, oh, I had no idea. We just have a lot of babies. So I assumed, right? And so like taking that time, they were like, oh, this is now making a lot more sense. And so I'm trusting you to bring us to that next phase. And I think building that has been really, really helpful. And this is just another iteration of bringing them along and educating them as well so they can be the advocate when you're not in the room.
That sounds amazing. So you're able to, as I like to say, sit on the same side of the table with them. Mm-hmm. So you're all singing from the same song sheet. I could throw all these idioms out as much as possible.
It's funny because our guiding principles are now called chorus. So I'm like, oh, just keep them coming, all the songs.
Sweet. That's all I had. I just sent them all out right now. So I got nothing else left for you guys. So you mentioned, obviously with like family planning, and obviously with your potential move to an alternative funding arrangement. And I know a lot of employers, especially in the last session, they were talking about this too. How are you handling rising costs? It's not even just medical, right? It's just across the board. How are you kind of handling those particular situations? And how are those conversations kind of moving back upward to C-level to make sure you guys are all, going to be on the same page come decision time?
Yeah, I think for us, it came with a lot of the myth-busting conversations on where our dollars are actually being spent, how our employees are utilizing our benefits. But it goes back to, again, early and often. I'm talking to them. I'm sharing reports quarterly of like, here's how our plans are performing. Here's what it potentially is going to look like. I'm excited next year because I'll actually have some claims data that I can utilize to say like, hey, we're trending in these ways. So maybe we can expect an increase in this specific area, or we should start planning now. But I find that having that transparency and the education has really helped from a cost perspective. We're also a fairly young organization. And so we grew really fast. And so our spend grew really fast. And so there's also an idea of where are we benchmarking? What is important to us when we look at benchmarks, when we look at cost containment, and just again, having those conversations with our teams to really discover what the outcome they're wanting is.
And so it sounds like by having that transparency, or at least building a structure to where transparency can exist, at least, right? It allows you to go into that renewal season with eyes wide open, right? I'm always a big believer that the best surprise is no surprise. But how many times are we crossing our fingers kind of hoping for the best, right? It doesn't matter what kind of benefit it is, you're just kind of hoping for the best. And by having that transparency, you know exactly what to expect. You can have those strategic conversations with whoever your vendor is, well ahead of time, and maybe you can negotiate longer deals out of it too, as well, right? And so let me ask this: so as part of managing these rising costs, I have to imagine, you're also an employee benefit, and you've got employees that you're trying to benefit, right? And so, do they have feedback for you? Are you getting their feedback? Is their feedback kind of guiding how you're managing these costs? I'm curious how that kind of plays into your strategy.
Yeah, so we have, in my opinion, I would love to hear all your strategies. In my opinion, a very strong employee listening framework. So we will actually survey our employees every year. And then we also have a really strong relationship with our internal communications team, in which we're able to get benefits questions into our annual survey, as well as our quarterly or monthly surveys as it makes sense. We also host listening sessions with all of our ERGs, as well as various demographics within our company. And so something that we always like to say is your feedback is important. I may not be able to do everything that you're asking me for, but I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to say why we can't either add this or maybe why our costs are increasing. Because one, it's not a decision that we always want to make, but it might be best for the business to remain sustainable and for us to be able to offer our comprehensive plans, or it might be the market. And that's really what it is, inflation and some other factors that we can't control. And so being open and transparent with those pieces has been very helpful in helping our employees understand and how we're managing that.
I appreciate that, because it sounds like you're very intentional with how you do employee feedback. You know, I've seen times where we do surveys and it's just ghost silence after that. You ask employees for a ton of feedback and then nothing happens. And they're wondering, did my voice even matter? What was the point of me spending 5, 10, 15 minutes of my time answering questions that you don't care about, right? And so I think it's really, you got to be careful, of course, because you don't want to promise the farm, but ultimately being intentional and also coming back and sharing like, hey, thank you for doing this survey. Are you having a hard time getting people to do those surveys? And then when during the year are you doing that?
Yeah, so we don't. I like to say our employees like to tell us what's what, and they're not afraid to. And so...
She's not kidding. I got to meet a lot of them a couple weeks ago. They got opinions.
They will tell you if they do not like something, and sometimes they're not kind. I've not cried.
Yet.
A little bit. Yeah, about it. But... Sorry, where was I going with this? No, so our employees, we usually have a good, like maybe 80% uptick on our surveying and our employees telling us what it is. Now, is a lot of it sometimes the same? Yeah. But it also, if it's the same, it means maybe we need to actually look at that a little bit deeper, because if we're getting the same question or the same suggestion, then it is something that is still very much on people's minds, and we do need to look at that. I think the one thing that I wanted to add to the previous part that you mentioned in regards to telling your employees, like, thank you, is be very transparent. I keep saying transparent, but what's the word I'm looking for? Direct in saying, I received this specific feedback either from this ERG or this survey, and we are doing this because. And I think it also gives that sense of, oh my gosh, you were listening to me. And it's an easy sentence to throw in there. Like, we heard from you on this survey that you really, really wanted this. So we're going to go ahead and do it. But yeah.
Do you feel like that makes it easier come time for open enrollment then?
Oh,
for making changes or keeping a benefit?
100%.
Okay. And so do you share the utilization with your employees? I'm kind of curious what you all do with that.
That's a great question. So we do not share it broadly, but if someone asks, I have the information, I'm willing to share it with folks. I think something that I've always looked at with our benefits, we build them to be equitable. Our benefits are not meant for everybody, right? Not everyone's going to be going through maybe a family building journey. Not everybody is going to need to seek specialized mental health services. And I'm very aware of that. And I'd like to make my employees aware of that as well, and saying like, hey, you know what? This person has a family building benefit, but we actually only expect 2% of our employees to utilize that, which is why, and we're doing this because our medical plans don't cover this. We're doing this because it's something good. And I find that by sharing those numbers, it has more of an impact than just saying, oh yeah, 40% of our employees are using this benefit. And just because it's 40%, yeah, I guess we're going to keep it. And I think also when I'm talking to my leadership team, that's also something that I want to make sure that I'm doing, that I'm not just looking at the utilization as my only basis of should we keep it or should we not, but actually the value that it's bringing and the impact that it's having to our employees. We actually have a benefit. It's a lifestyle spending account. And let me tell you, I fought tooth and nail to keep this thing last year, because our leadership team, and I think this is being recorded, so just like cut this part out. But they were like, well, why do we have this? Why are we just giving employees money? I don't understand what's the benefit for it. And I was like, well, this isn't really for you. Like, you're making maybe enough money where you don't have to think about your groceries. You don't have to think about your internet or your phone bill or caregiving, but it has a major impact for the people that do. And we have high utilization, but it's not just about that. It's about what they're spending it on, and even just how they say, this makes me happy to work at Guild because I understand that you're looking at not only like, what does productivity mean, but supporting my family and supporting me so I can be productive at work.
That's being in HR. I'm not in HR, but your job looks really hard. And I just want to commend you all because I've always been a big believer that HR is like the heartbeat of organizations. And you have to wear so many hats. And if you've learned one thing about benefits over the last decade is employees are seeking employers to offer literally everything under the sun. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I wouldn't say that was so much the case, right? And so again, I feel for you. So that's hard to do. And it also means you have to stay on top of all this stuff, which is why you got to start early as much as possible. But it also makes me think about equity, right? So you mentioned building a benefits program that's equitable, and that's going to be really hard to do, especially if you have multiple demographics in your workforce, generations, even just geographic footprint sometimes is difficult to offer a health plan that's going to have the same level of access and high quality across the entire nation. So I'm curious from your vantage point, any trade-offs you've had to make? Like, how do you prioritize one benefit over another? Is it a long-term strategy? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so something that we have done, we've done kind of what I'm going to call a hotspot dashboard, and it looks at the demographics that we have. What are those key benefits that those demographics need? So again, a little bit about Guild. We're 65% female, average age is 35. We like to have our babies and we like to eat food. I know it's true. But within that, we want to make sure that we're also looking across the generations, but we have focused our benefits on those specific demographics. So that's where we find the need. Now, with that, something that I've tried to do is make sure that I'm looking at vendors that are either growing in their roadmap to support the other demographics, or what I call universal design. So it might be built for a certain group, but they can support others in that space as needed. With that, we have gotten a lot of feedback of, hey, it seems like we're taking care of our caregivers a lot. We're taking care of our women a lot. And another piece of that is having a conversation with our leadership on what our priorities are. We were very much told we want to be the best place to work for women, for parents, and for those that are seeking educational opportunities. And so that has driven a lot of the benefits that we offer, because we can then go back to say, you know what, this is what we were grounded on and this is what we want to do. Now, it doesn't mean we're leaving you behind, but it does mean that we might see a little bit more focus in those areas, but this is why.
I love what you just said, because what you're doing is you're taking it back to the why you're offering benefits in the first place, right? And I think that's easily forgotten. A lot of times, in conversations, we look at renewal season in 12-month chunks as if your business isn't going to exist 12 months from now. You're just hoping for the best. By having these long-term roadmaps and looking at the utilization, being intentional with it, but also making sure that your organizational culture your benefits are breathing life into your culture, right? I think is also going to, or honestly believe that the employee satisfaction levels are going to go through the roof, right? Are there any benefits that you've had to get rid of, or maybe you had to bring in and get rid of something else to kind of accomplish these? Because obviously money doesn't grow on trees, unfortunately.
Yeah. So something that we are doing, one we started last year, we're going to continue doing, is simplifying. I think they mentioned it. Point solutions are everywhere, and there is a lot of overlap potentially with the benefits that you offer. And so we did an exercise of looking at specifically our legal benefits and saying, like, you know what, we get legal support through this benefit, estate planning through this benefit. Do we really need a standalone? And then we did look at utilization. We looked at what the impact would be on removing that benefit. We looked at who that benefit was directly supporting. And we decided, you know what, we're going to remove this because there's other options. But we did a targeted campaign to say, hey, we're removing this, but don't worry, you still get the same services just in these ways. And we looked at and we talked to those people who were the high utilizers. We looked at those who we created this benefit for, and they were like, oh yeah, no, we totally understand. We get it. that makes sense. And I think because of that and why we said like, hey, we're doing this to simplify. So when you don't have to go to 3 different places, you can now just go to 2. And then also how this would impact and support our overall ecosystem for programs and the future opportunity. People were okay with that.
Point solution fatigue is real. You mentioned that, not only from HR, but also the employees. I mean, how many people have gone to a conference and you go to the exhibit hall and there's a gazillion vendors just like, they're like sharks, right? They're coming after you. But it's nice to get the swag. I'm not going to lie. Bring it back to the kids.
Swag, my favorite one right now, the stuffies. Anyone? It's making its rounds.
It's not bad.
Yeah.
Not bad.
Yeah. My husband's not happy about it, but I come home with at least 6 of them.
I grabbed some of our eye patches actually for my red eye flight next week. But ultimately, I mean, it's nice. You get to see all these vendors, you hear all these great ideas, and you go back to your office, and then you're just like analysis paralysis. Well, the same thing happens with employees too, right? When they get to open enrollment season and they hear that 1 hour presentation, they're like, what in the heck am I supposed to do with all this information, right? There's so many different vendors, so many different logos. How in the world do I handle this? So as you were mentioning, Dominique, that you have a ton of different vendors and there's a lot of overlap there. When you get to open enrollment, what does that communication strategy look like? How are you explaining all of this to your employees so that it actually makes sense?
Yeah, so we actually have started to kind of provide different tracks a little bit. So again, focusing on what is most important to our employees and how they might access the benefits. So very, very high level. This last year, we actually broke it down of do you have dependents or don't you have dependents? Because that'll probably determine the benefits that you access within our ecosystem. And we actually found that by doing that, employees were like, oh my gosh, this was great because I was able to focus on the things that I might need versus hearing about everything that I may never touch or talk about. The other thing that we started doing was what we call benefit bites. And so we have a great internal team, and they actually will help us create different videos about our different benefits. But it's not just talking about the benefit itself, it's more so talking about the life moment in which that benefit might be helpful. And so we've also found that employees are like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that, I was going on leave to have a baby, that we had this benefit to help me with backup care, that we had this parental coach that could help me with sleep and some of these other things until I looked at this benefit bite. And so trying to find ways that they can access the information on their own within open enrollment and after, I think has been really important because we're spending so much time creating these materials. Don't make it a one and done. Figure out how you can utilize it throughout the year.
And I'd add, make sure that the talk track is not just reading copays on a screen.
100%.
I mean, that is like the traditional way that we explain benefits. I see some nodding heads here, so clearly, we need to do a better job in our business. Storytelling, I feel like, is such a fantastic way. Mm-hmm. And I know we're here to talk about renewals, but I would argue that your open enrollment season is part of your renewal. You need to get your employees bought in, right? Because or else it's going to be 12 months of hell for you after you make some changes, if you make any changes.
Yeah.
So,
can I add to that?
Yeah, please.
So something that we do as like a lead up. So we have what I call like our road to open enrollment. And I actually get my leadership team involved to talk about what the renewal season looked like and saying like, hey, here's actually how those decisions were made. Here's what went into those conversations. And we create, I don't know how many people read it. I read it because I'm interested in it, but it's actually like a behind the curtains type of view of, hey, these are the conversations. Here's who we had them with. Here's what we got. We got a 22% increase from Cigna. Here's why that happened. And we find that by leading that into or having that out there before we start talking about co-pays and we start talking about cost premiums and things like that, people have an understanding as to like, oh, this is what it went into this. And now I can make the decisions that I need to make for my family.
Cigna is here, so.
Oh, sorry. We should have a conversation about that.
I'm messing with you, Cigna. Just kidding. Not really. All right. So,
we're gonna get
but
fired.
It actually makes me. I'm getting fired. Ultimately, when you're having these discussions with leadership, I'm curious. What kind of lessons are you learning in these? Like, what kind of lessons have you learned from past experiences that you're bringing forth today?
Yeah. One of the biggest ones I want to say just in this last one is looking at your renewal and your conversations with your leadership as both education and connection moments. As I mentioned, I did a lot of myth busting with my executive team this last time. But then additionally, I took the directive of, hey, we need to cut costs. We need to find some savings very, very directly, and was like, okay, here's what we can do. And actually, by way of a misdeleted slide that I was like originally like, hey, we should do this really cool benefit that'll be really supportive for our employees. I was going to take it out because I was like, they're never going to say yes to this. But I left it in. And they were like, wait a minute, what's that? And I actually found that even though the directive was, hey, we need to cut costs, they still wanted to know what other supports were available. What else could we do? And though we didn't implement that benefit, it did start a conversation on how can we do that in the future, or maybe what other levers can we pull to be able to do that. So I think using them not only as like a here's what's happening, but a connection moment to the benefits that we're offering. And then the other thing, and I actually got this from one of my other leaders, is I actually treat it like a garage sale when I'm talking to my vendors or my executive team. As long as I'm still within budget, I'm coming in saying like, here's what I'm thinking we should do, and it's based off of the objectives and priorities. I'm going to go in and say, I think we should do this thing all the way up here. Go all in, because guess what? In a garage sale, normally you're going to talk you down, right? You're going to negotiate. But if I don't start high, then I don't know if they're not going to say, they could say yes, they could say no. And most of the time I actually find they're like, okay, cool. Let's do that. Let's start there.
It's like shooting for the moon. Yeah. 100%. I love that.
You don't know if you don't ask.
So I guess quickly, when they see you kind of shooting for the moon or treating it like a garage sale, what's the feedback there?
I don't know if they know that that's what I'm doing. So now if they see this, they're going to be like, oh, Dominique, this is what you've been doing this whole time. No, but honestly, the feedback that I've gotten, and this was outside of the room when I'm talking to my CPO after I'm presenting, she was like, if you never brought that up, then it never would have happened. So it's a good thing that you even did. Because again, the worst thing they could say is no, right? So
during the renewal season, sometimes sometimes you're only as strong as the partners you're working with as well. Mm-hmm. So walk me through, how do you think people in your role and people in my role, or two organizations that are hiring each other to a degree, if you think about it, right? How do we partner best to make sure that it's just a good symbiotic relationship moving forward?
Yeah, I'm going to say Ed, take some notes, because this is going to be this year. But for one of the things that I've learned is, one, share the best ways that your broker team can actually engage with your leadership team, especially if they're going to be in the room having some of those conversations. I have found more often than not that if my executive team does not respect or trust my broker team, we're not going to go anywhere. A lot of the times they think, well, you're trying to upsell me. What's in it for you? All of those things. And so you have to figure out the best way to build that connection, build that relationship. And that's something I think actually, Ed, I was telling you, I'm like, here's what he likes. Here's what he doesn't like. Don't talk about that. Here's where we're focusing in some of these conversations. And it's important because you want to build that trust. The other thing is that you're the expert of your people. You know your people up, down, sideways, but your benefits broker is the expert in the landscape. And so trusting them to say, okay, you're going to take me down this path, but also I am that person that is a grain of salt, like, we don't know what's going to happen, maybe. So ask all the questions. Question everything. You see in an article, ask the question. If they can answer it, awesome. If not, we'll give them another chance, but we'll see. 2 out of 3, right? And then ensure you have the right partner. Like, don't feel like you have to continue with the same broker that you have had because it's how your company has done it. We made the shift, and this is not a sales pitch, I promise you. We made the switch to Nava after being with our previous broker for 5+ years. And the reason why is that we would ask questions and we were just getting the same answer. And there wasn't any creativity. There wasn't any, it felt like it was just kind of, oh, here's the template that we share with everybody. And we were like, this isn't what we want anymore. And so we made that decision to make the shift. It was scary. It was kind of like a little bit of an unknown, but how many months are we in?
6, 5, 4, 3?
3, 2, 1. So
years.
So it feels like years, but so far it's been great because I've done that. I've asked Ed all the questions, and guess what? He's coming back and he's answering all the questions. So don't just stay with someone if it's not serving you.
But I appreciate that because anything I learn or anything your broker learns, you should be the beneficiary of. And I've always felt that complacency is the biggest threat to progress. And that is something that has been a game changer for me in my career. That's been something that I've appreciated about Nava or just some forward-thinking partners in the industry, because benefits have evolved, like we talked about, right? 10 years ago, were benefits exactly the same? They weren't. And so you need someone that's going to challenge your thinking, not just be a yes man the entire time, and to also tell you what you don't know. Sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And so I appreciate all the questions. And some of 2 out of 3, it's batting really well for me if I'm hitting 2 out of 3. But at the same time, that challenges the relationship to get stronger at the end of the day, because it is a partnership. It shouldn't be a transactional relationship, at least in my opinion as well. I guess just to kind of close it out before we get into some Q&A really quickly, any last kind of tools or tricks, last pieces of advice you'd give?
I will say one, this is probably a selfish one, just knowing my role. So again, I'm a senior manager. I'm that 7th circle of hell doing the actual work. And I actually was in the room for the first time last year talking to our CPO, our CEO and our CFO, because our CPO was out. And I actually was able to, again, figure out, whoa, our leadership wasn't really saying what we needed to maybe be saying in the room. So my one tip, plus 5 more, is keep your team in the loop, especially if they're not in the room. And if someone is doing that work daily, see if you can get them in there, whether it is to have them there as like a, hey, they're going to ask a random question that I might not know in the moment, but guess what? This person does. So I'm going to have them just on deck. I found that to be very helpful, again, just building trust and also saying like, yeah, we know our stuff, right? Amp up your own brand when you're going through your renewal season, because we're doing hard work and I think it needs to be appreciated by those teams. The other thing is backwards planning. When do you need to have your decisions by? What is that in like that true due date? Up it by a week and then say, this is what I need and when I need it by, and share that off with your teams as well, your leadership team, and saying like, hey, EA, I'm going to need them for these specific meetings. Can we get that on the calendar now so that we can have those conversations so then they know what's coming up and how important it is?
Awesome. Well, thank you. Any questions from the audience?
It's getting kind of loud, so we're going to take Q&A on the road.
Oh, sweet. Even better.
So cocktails are imminent, I assure you. Just quickly want to wrap up. Thank you once more for being here today. Really appreciate it. Ed and Dominique, thank you so much. Really great session. I hope it's really clear that Nava takes the mission of fixing healthcare very, very sincerely and seriously. And we don't just talk about it. We're very, very intentional about trying to go about solving these problems. But thank you guys all so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.